I want to talk about the terrorism enhancement because I think a lot of people are wondering, well, how is this sentence even allowed if they didn't have firearms, if they didn't assault police officers, if they weren't violent? Yes, they trespassed on the Capitol. They weren't supposed to. You could make the argument that you're making that they weren't aware that they weren't allowed in there because police officers weren't trying to get them out. But how are these almost 2 decade sentences justified? And is the answer to that the terrorism enhancement? And can you explain that to us?
Right. So the convictions themselves, seditious conspiracy and obstruction of an official proceeding, are punishable by up to 20 years in prison. So that's sort of where the guidance began. The terror enhancement, however, is based on U.S. sentencing guidance that is, usually followed or given. And there is a specific provision to add sentencing, to add prison time based on an act of terrorism. The language, unfortunately, is vague now as you look at it, because the people who probably drafted it thought that prosecutors and a judge would never consider shaking a metal fence, equate that to blowing up a government building or attacking a military installation or using weapons of mass destruction or plotting a mass casualty event. I'm sure that the people who drafted that never thought that it would be manipulated and exploited the way that Judge Kelly and the government here, the Biden regime, has done. So he pulled out this provision that says destruction of government property can be considered a crime of terrorism. He claimed that the shaking of the fence destroyed government property, even though they didn't destroy it. It's a metal fence. They shook it. And that is where the enhancement came from. It was just stunning to sit there in court last week, Liz, and hear Judge Kelly before the sentencing in a 3-hour oral ruling he gave. Of course, he's an Irish guy, so he likes to listen to himself talk. I can say that as an Irish person and one married to one. But this was not funny at all. He droned on and on for 3 hours, basically regurgitating every facet of the government's case, and then warned that he would be imposing this terrorism enhancement based on the shaking of the fence. Liz, he added the terror enhancement to Enrique Tarrio for shaking a fence when he was in another state. I mean, I wish I could try to explain that, but I can't. Now, of course, this will all be subject of appeal. That will take years. However, these men's lives and the lives of many others have been ruined. But what's really dangerous here is the precedent that these judges and DOJ are setting, not just in the short term, but the long term. If Donald Trump is convicted of obstruction of an official proceeding, Jack Smith could seek a terror enhancement because Judge Amit Mehta has already declared obstruction of an official proceeding a federal crime of terrorism. So we are going to see short-term as well as long-term consequences for what's happening in this DC courthouse.